I walked up the familiar stone pathway to my childhood home in suburban Columbus, Ohio, carrying my 4-year-old daughter Emma on my hip. The November air was crisp, and golden leaves crunched under my boots as we approached the front door decorated with Mom's handmade autumn wreath. Emma giggled and pointed at the turkey decorations, her bright blue eyes sparkling with excitement for her first real Thanksgiving dinner with the whole family. I had been looking forward to this moment for weeks, hoping that maybe this year would be different, that maybe my family would finally accept me as the single father I had become after losing my wife Sarah 2 years ago in that terrible car accident. But the moment Dad opened the door, I knew something was terribly wrong. His face was stone cold, his jaw set in that familiar expression of disappointment I remembered from childhood. Before I could even say hello, he launched into a vicious verbal attack that would change everything forever. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "The family disgrace himself." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there frozen on the doorstep, Emma still in my arms, as Dad continued his brutal assault. "You think you can just show up here after embarrassing this family for 2 years, walking around town like some pathetic deadbeat, living in that tiny apartment, making us all look bad?" His voice grew louder with each word, and I could see neighbors starting to peek through their windows. Mom appeared behind him, her face pale and worried, but she said nothing to defend me. My brother Tyler emerged from the living room, 24 years old and home from Princeton, shaking his head in disgust. My sister Jessica stood in the hallway with her husband Mark, both of them looking at me like I was something they had scraped off their shoes. "Dad, please," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady for Emma's sake. "It's Thanksgiving. Can we just what?" he roared, stepping closer. "Pretend you're not a complete failure? Pretend you haven't brought shame on this family name? Your wife is dead, August, and instead of being a real man and getting your life together, you're out there playing house with that little girl, living like some kind of charity case." The words cut deep because they were so far from the truth it was almost laughable. If only he knew that I had been quietly supporting this entire family for the past 2 years through an anonymous trust fund I had established with my $20 million inheritance from Sarah's tech company stock options. Every month, I had been ensuring that Dad's medical bills were paid, Tyler's Princeton tuition was covered, Jessica's mortgage payments were current, and Mom's expensive diabetes medications were available. But I had kept this secret, living modestly in a small 2-bedroom apartment while watching them struggle with pride and dignity, never knowing their struggles were being eased by the son they had turned their backs on. "I work hard, Dad," I said, still trying to maintain some semblance of peace. "I take care of Emma. I pay my bills. I'm doing the best I can." "The best you can?" Tyler laughed bitterly from behind Dad. "August, you're 32 years old, living in subsidized housing, working at that dead-end office job. You're an embarrassment to everything this family stands for." What Tyler didn't know was that my dead-end office job was actually a cover. I went to work every day at a small accounting firm where I had arranged to have a position that allowed me flexibility to care for Emma, while managing my substantial investment portfolio from behind the scenes. The owner, an old friend of Sarah's, knew my situation and had created the perfect setup for me to maintain my privacy while staying close to my daughter. Emma started to whimper in my arms, sensing the tension and hostility radiating from every family member gathered in the doorway. I bounced her gently, whispering that everything was okay, but inside I was breaking apart. These were the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally, yet here they stood, united in their judgment and rejection. "You know what the worst part is?" Jessica chimed in, her voice sharp and cutting. "You don't even try to better yourself. Sarah's been gone for 2 years. August, 2 years. When are you going to stop wallowing and become the man she would have wanted you to be?" The irony was devastating. Sarah would have been proud of exactly what I had become. She would have loved seeing how I had taken her gift and used it to secretly care for the family that was now rejecting me. She would have admired my restraint, my humility, my decision to help from the shadows rather than seeking recognition or gratitude. But I couldn't tell them any of this without destroying the carefully constructed system that had been keeping them afloat. That's when Dad delivered the final blow. His face turned red with anger, and he pointed a thick finger at my chest. "Get out," he said through gritted teeth. "Get out, you piece of trash, And don't come back until you've made something of yourself. This family doesn't need your negativity and failure bringing us down." He actually put his hands on my shoulders and pushed me backward off the porch steps. I stumbled slightly, instinctively tightening my grip on Emma to make sure she was safe. The entire extended family had gathered now, aunts and uncles and cousins, all watching this humiliating spectacle in complete silence. Not one person spoke up in my defense. Not one person suggested that maybe, just maybe, Dad was being too harsh on a man who had lost his wife and was trying his best to raise a small child alone. I looked at each face, memorizing their expressions of disapproval and disgust. These people had no idea they were rejecting the person who had been their financial lifeline for years. They had no clue that their mortgage payments, their medical bills, their college tuition, and their prescription medications had all been quietly handled by the man they were now calling trash. "Fine," I said simply, my voice steady despite the storm raging in my chest. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't try to defend myself or explain anything. I just turned around, walked back to my modest Honda Civic, buckled Emma into her car seat, and drove away from the only family I had left in the world. As I pulled out of the driveway, my phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. I glanced at it quickly at the stop sign and felt a cold shock run through my system. The family had just missed their third consecutive mortgage payment, and the bank was threatening foreclosure within 30 days. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. They had just kicked out their financial lifeline without having any idea what they had done. I drove through the quiet suburbs of Columbus as darkness fell, Emma's soft breathing from the back seat the only sound in the car. She had fallen asleep during the 20-minute drive home, exhausted from the emotional trauma she had witnessed but couldn't understand. The streetlights illuminated rows of middle-class homes, where families were probably gathered around dinner tables, sharing gratitude and love, everything I had hoped to experience just hours earlier. When I pulled into the parking lot of our modest apartment complex, I sat for a moment staring at the building that had been our home for the past year and a half. It wasn't much to look at from the outside. 2 stories of basic brown brick, small windows, a tiny playground where Emma loved to swing every evening after dinner. To my family, this place represented failure and shame. To me, it represented a conscious choice to live humbly while using my wealth responsibly. I carried Emma upstairs to our second-floor unit, her head resting against my shoulder as I unlocked the door to apartment 214. The space was small but warm and filled with love. Emma's drawings covered the refrigerator. Her toys were neatly organized in colorful bins, and photos of Sarah smiled at us from every surface. This was a home built on memory, hope, and the determination to give my daughter a normal childhood despite our tragic circumstances. After tucking Emma into her small bed surrounded by stuffed animals and reading her favorite bedtime story about a brave little bunny, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down at my laptop in the living room. The furniture was simple and functional, purchased from discount stores and secondhand shops, but it served our needs perfectly. Emma had never wanted for anything important, and I had made sure her life was stable and secure while maintaining the appearance of modest means. I opened my secure banking app and stared at the numbers that still sometimes took my breath away. $20,347,612. The balance had grown substantially since Sarah's death, as her stock options in the tech startup continued to appreciate, and my conservative investment strategy had yielded steady returns. This was generational wealth, the kind of money that could change not just my life and Emma's future, but the lives of everyone in my extended family for decades to come. Sarah had been a brilliant software engineer, one of the early employees at a small tech company that developed revolutionary data compression algorithms. When the company went public 3 years ago, her stock options had suddenly made us extraordinarily wealthy. We had planned to use the money wisely, to invest in Emma's future and maybe buy a nice house. But Sarah had always insisted we live modestly and help others when possible. She never got to see just how much her foresight and hard work would be worth. I clicked through to the trust account I had established with my lawyer, David Mitchell, 6 months after Sarah's funeral. The Samuel Trust, named after Sarah's grandfather who had taught her the value of quiet generosity, had been making anonymous payments to my family members for nearly 2 years. Every transaction was carefully documented, every payment structured to look like it came from various legitimate sources. Dad's heart surgery 18 months ago had cost $68,000 after insurance. The Samuel Trust had quietly paid the balance, making it appear as though Dad's construction company insurance had covered more than expected. Tyler's Princeton tuition, which ran $95,000 per year, had been mysteriously supplemented by a need-based scholarship that happened to cover exactly what the family couldn't afford. Jessica's house had been saved from foreclosure twice when anonymous payments of $21,000 each had suddenly appeared in her mortgage account, attributed to escrow adjustments that her bank couldn't quite explain, but was happy to accept. Mom's diabetes medication cost $800 per month, even with insurance, a burden that had been eating away at Dad's construction income for years. The Samuel Trust had arranged for her to be enrolled in a pharmaceutical trial program that provided her medications at no cost, when in reality I was simply paying the pharmacy directly through a complex series of corporate intermediaries. In total, I had quietly provided $453,000 to my family over the past 2 years, money that had kept Dad's business afloat during the economic downturn, money that had allowed Tyler to stay at his dream school, money that had saved Jessica's marriage from the financial stress that destroys so many relationships, money that had kept Mom healthy and comfortable despite her chronic condition. But my private investigator's latest report, which I opened with growing anger, revealed the devastating truth about what my family really thought of me. For months, they had been telling extended relatives and family friends that I was a deadbeat dad who was mooching off the family and too proud to accept help. They had been taking credit for their own financial stability, while painting me as a failure who refused assistance and was too stubborn to get his life together. Dad had apparently told multiple people at his construction site that he was carrying August financially, and that I was too embarrassed to admit I needed help. Tyler had told his college friends that his family was supporting his unemployed brother, and that I was living off family charity. Jessica had been telling her teacher colleagues that the family was trying to help August get back on his feet, but that I was too proud to accept their generous offers. The truth was so completely inverted, it was almost surreal. Not only was I not taking anything from them, but I was the reason they could afford to maintain their middle-class lifestyle at all. I was the invisible foundation holding up their entire financial structure, and they were using my perceived failure as a way to feel better about themselves and gain sympathy from others. I leaned back in my second-hand recliner and closed my eyes, thinking about Sarah and what she would want me to do. She had always believed in the power of truth, in the importance of family, and in the need to help others learn and grow rather than simply enabling them. She would have been heartbroken by tonight's scene, but she also would have understood that sometimes people need to face consequences before they can appreciate what they have. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was David Mitchell, my lawyer, calling from his office even though it was nearly 10 o'clock on Thanksgiving night. "August, I just got word from the bank handling your family's mortgage," he said without preamble. "They missed their 3rd consecutive payment as of yesterday. The foreclosure process will begin on Monday morning, unless they can come up with $12,000 in back payments, plus penalties." "How long do they have?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. 30 days maximum before the house goes to auction. Probably less if the bank wants to move quickly before the holidays." He paused. "Do you want me to make another anonymous payment?" "No," I said quietly. "Not this time. They need to understand what's really happening before I help them again. August, there's something else you need to know. Your Uncle Marcus has been in contact with the bank. He's positioning himself to help the family, but I've reviewed his proposed loan terms. They're predatory. He's essentially planning to steal their house through legal manipulation." My blood ran cold. Marcus was Dad's younger brother, a man who had always been jealous of our family's stability and success. He had built a small real estate empire by swooping in to help families in financial distress, then structuring deals that eventually allowed him to take possession of their properties for far less than they were worth. "What kind of terms?" I asked. "High-interest private loan using the house as collateral, with clauses that would allow him to foreclose if they miss even one payment. He's basically offering to pay off their current mortgage in exchange for a new loan they'll never be able to fulfill. Within 6 months, he'll own their house and they'll be paying him rent to live in their own home." The pieces were falling into place. Marcus had probably been waiting for this moment, watching my family struggle, knowing they were too proud to ask for help from me, positioning himself as their savior, when in reality, he was planning to become their predator. I looked around our small apartment, at the photos of Sarah, at Emma's toys scattered on the coffee table, at the simple life we had built together. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of showing my family exactly what they had thrown away when they called me trash and kicked me out of their house. But tonight, I just wanted to hold my daughter close and remember why I was fighting for something better. The next morning, I dropped Emma off at her daycare and drove across town to meet with James Rodriguez, the private investigator I had hired 3 months earlier to keep tabs on my family's situation. James was a former police detective who specialized in financial investigations, and he had been discreetly monitoring my family's circumstances to help me understand how best to structure my anonymous assistance. We met at a small diner near downtown Columbus, far from any neighborhood where my family might spot us. James had a thick folder waiting for me when I arrived, and his expression was grim as I slid into the booth across from him. "August, I need to show you some things that are going to be hard to see," he said, opening the folder to reveal bank statements, credit reports, and surveillance photos. "Your family's situation is much worse than you realize, and there are some things happening behind the scenes that you need to know about." The first set of documents revealed the true state of Dad's construction business, Henderson Construction, which he had been running for 22 years. What I thought was a stable, modestly successful operation was actually on the verge of complete collapse. Dad had been hiding massive debts from the family, borrowing against equipment and tools to pay for basic operating expenses, and his accounts receivable showed that several major clients hadn't paid their bills in over 6 months. "Your father owes $68,000 to various suppliers and subcontractors," James explained, pointing to a detailed breakdown. "His business checking account has been overdrawn for 3 weeks. He's been using personal credit cards to buy materials for jobs, hoping to get paid before the bills come due. But it's a cycle he can't maintain much longer. The medical bills from Dad's heart surgery, which I thought had been resolved through my anonymous payments, had apparently spawned additional complications. Follow-up treatments, prescription medications, and physical therapy had created another layer of debt that Dad had been hiding from the family to avoid worry and stress. He's been working 12-hour days trying to catch up, taking jobs that barely break even just to keep cash flowing," James continued. "Your mother doesn't know how bad things really are. She thinks the business is just going through a slow period." The documentation about Mom's situation was equally heartbreaking. Linda Henderson, my 60-year-old mother who should have been enjoying a comfortable pre-retirement phase of life, had been working 3 separate part-time jobs to help keep the family afloat. In addition to her regular 25-hour-per-week position at a local retail store, she had been cleaning office buildings early in the morning and doing data entry work from home in the evenings. She's been getting up at 4:30 in the morning to clean medical offices before her retail shift starts, James said, showing me photos of Mom walking into an office building in the pre-dawn darkness, carrying cleaning supplies. Then she works at the store from 10 to 3, comes home to do data entry for 4 or 5 hours, and still manages to cook dinner for the family. She's been doing this schedule for 8 months. What broke my heart most was learning that Mom had been secretly selling family heirlooms and sentimental items to generate extra cash. Dad's father's pocket watch, Mom's grandmother's jewelry, even some of my childhood baseball cards and trophies had been quietly sold through online auctions and local pawn shops. Tyler's situation at Princeton was even more precarious than I had realized. The need-based scholarship I had arranged through the Samuel Trust was covering tuition, but living expenses, books, and other costs were stretching the family budget beyond its limits. James showed me credit card statements revealing that Tyler had been borrowing money to cover basic necessities, believing that his family was sacrificing to support his education. "He's been eating 1 meal a day to save money," James explained. "His roommates have noticed that he's lost weight and seems stressed all the time. He thinks your parents are struggling because they're paying for his school, so he's been trying to cut every possible expense. Even worse, Tyler's girlfriend Amanda had broken up with him 2 weeks earlier because she thought his family was poor and couldn't provide the kind of stable future she was looking for. Tyler had been devastated, not understanding that his family's appearance of financial stress was actually being caused by their pride and their inability to accept help from the son they had rejected. Jessica's marriage to Mark was hanging by a thread, and both of them had been attending counseling sessions to try to save their relationship from the financial pressures that were destroying their happiness. The anonymous mortgage payments I had been making had prevented foreclosure, but the underlying stress of living paycheck to paycheck had created constant tension and arguments. "They fight about money almost every night," James said, showing me a report from a counselor friend who had been discreetly monitoring their situation. "Mark has been working overtime at the auto plant, sometimes pulling double shifts, but it's never enough to get ahead. Jessica has been applying for higher-paying teaching positions in other districts, but the stress is affecting her job performance. Their 8-year-old son, my nephew Danny, had been asking why Mommy and Daddy were always worried and why they couldn't afford the things his friends at school had." Jessica and Mark had been struggling to explain their financial situation to a child without creating anxiety and insecurity. But the most devastating revelation was about Marcus and his predatory scheme. James had uncovered evidence that Marcus had been systematically targeting families in financial distress throughout Columbus, using his real estate knowledge and legal connections to structure deals that appeared helpful but were designed to transfer property ownership to him at below-market prices. "Your uncle has acquired 14 properties this way over the past 5 years, James explained, showing me a detailed chart of Marcus's real estate holdings. He approaches families who are behind on mortgage payments, offers to help by paying off their existing loans, then structures new private mortgages with terms that guarantee default. Within 6 to 18 months, he forecloses and takes possession of houses worth far more than what he paid for them. The evidence showed that Marcus had been monitoring my family's situation for months, waiting for the perfect moment to swoop in with his generous offer to help. He had even been spreading rumors around Dad's construction sites about my supposed failures, helping to create the negative narrative that had led to last night's confrontation. He's been telling people that you're too proud to help your family, and that someone needs to step in and take care of them, James said. He's been positioning himself as the responsible family member who's willing to make the hard decisions that need to be made. What Marcus didn't know was that I had been the one keeping my family afloat all along. His entire scheme was based on the assumption that they were genuinely in financial distress with no other options for help. The irony was that the person he was trying to push out of the family was the same person whose money he was planning to replace with his predatory loans. As I drove home from my meeting with James, I realized that my family's rejection of me the night before hadn't just been about their disappointment in my perceived failures. They had been drowning in financial stress, working themselves to exhaustion, hiding their struggles from each other, and desperately looking for someone to blame for their pain. I had become the convenient scapegoat for problems that I had actually been trying to solve all along. But I had also realized something else. Simply continuing to help them anonymously wasn't going to fix the real problem. My family needed to understand what they had lost, and what they were about to lose if they didn't start appreciating the people who truly cared about them. They needed to learn the difference between someone who helps from love and someone who helps for profit. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. It was time to stop hiding in the shadows and start fighting back. The next morning, I packed a small suitcase for Emma and myself and loaded up my Honda Civic for a drive that would take us 14 hours south to Miami, Florida. Emma was excited about the adventure, thinking we were going on a spontaneous vacation, which in a way we were. But this trip had a much deeper purpose than just getting away from the pain of Thanksgiving. As we drove through Georgia in the afternoon sunshine, Emma napping in her car seat with her favorite stuffed elephant, I called my lawyer David Mitchell to begin setting the wheels in motion for what I had decided would be the most important lesson my family would ever receive. "David, I want you to prepare a complete financial disclosure package," I said through my car's hands. "Free system. Everything. The total inheritance, the trust fund activities, every payment made to every family member, all of it documented with dates, amounts, and purposes." "Are you sure about this, August?" David asked. "Once you reveal the extent of your involvement, there's no going back to anonymous assistance, I'm sure. But I want it done in a very specific way. I want you to create a presentation that shows them exactly what they threw away when they called me trash and kicked me out of their house. What did you have in mind? I want you to set up a meeting with the family. Tell them that you're handling some previously unknown aspects of Sarah's estate and that there are some things they need to know. Make it sound official and important. Schedule it for exactly 1 week from today, next Friday afternoon. What about their immediate financial crisis? The foreclosure proceedings start on Monday. Let them happen. Let Marcus make his offer. Let them see what their other options really look like before they understand what they rejected. I had been planning this revelation for months, ever since I realized that my anonymous help was enabling rather than empowering my family. They needed to face the consequences of their choices and understand the true value of family loyalty before they could appreciate what had been freely given to them. As we crossed into Florida and Emma woke up to see palm trees for the first time in her young life, I felt a sense of anticipation building. We were heading to a place that represented everything my family thought I could never achieve, a symbol of the success they believed I was incapable of earning. The beach house in Miami had been one of my first major purchases after receiving Sarah's inheritance. It was a $6 million estate on Key Biscayne, with 200 feet of private beach frontage, 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, and amenities that most people could only dream of. I had bought it under the name of a limited liability company, Seashore Properties LLC, to maintain privacy and avoid drawing attention to my wealth. When we pulled through the private gates at sunset, Emma's eyes went wide with wonder. The house was a stunning example of modern coastal architecture, with floor-to-ceiling windows, white stone facades, and landscaping that looked like it belonged in a luxury resort. The circular driveway led to a 4-car garage that currently housed my other vehicles, a BMW SUV, a classic 1967 Mustang that had been Sarah's dream car, and a small boat for exploring the bay. "Daddy, whose house is this?" Emma asked as I carried our bags toward the front door. "It's our house, sweetheart," I said, watching her face light up with amazement. "We can stay here whenever we want." The interior was even more impressive than the exterior, designed by one of Miami's top architectural firms with custom furniture, original artwork, and technology that seamlessly integrated into every room. The living room opened directly onto a covered terrace, with an infinity pool that appeared to flow directly into the ocean beyond. Emma immediately ran toward the sliding glass doors, pressing her face against the windows to stare at the waves. This house represented financial security that my family couldn't even imagine. The monthly maintenance costs alone exceeded what most families spent on housing. But for me, it was simply a retreat where Emma and I could escape the pressures of our everyday life in Columbus. We had been here only 6 times since I bought it, using it primarily for long weekends when I needed to think clearly, or when Emma needed to experience the joy of building sandcastles on our private beach. That evening, after Emma had fallen asleep in one of the guest bedrooms overlooking the ocean, I sat on the terrace with my laptop and began orchestrating the most complex financial and emotional maneuver of my life. I video called David from the pool deck, the Miami skyline twinkling in the background, and outlined my complete strategy for revealing the truth to my family. "I want you to contact Jake Morrison," I said, referring to a documentary filmmaker friend who owed me a favor after I had anonymously funded his last project. "Tell him I need him to discreetly film a family meeting. I want everything documented." "August, are you planning to publicly humiliate your family?" "No, David. I'm planning to publicly honor them. But first they need to understand what honor really means." I had realized that my family's behavior toward me wasn't just about money or pride. It was about fear, shame, and their inability to reconcile their love for me with their disappointment in what they thought my life had become. They needed to see that success isn't always visible, that strength sometimes looks like humility, and that the person they had rejected was actually the person who had been saving them all along. Over the next hour, I outlined a plan that would accomplish several goals simultaneously. First, it would save my family from Marcus's predatory scheme by exposing his true intentions and providing them with legitimate alternatives. Second, it would reveal the extent of my secret assistance in a way that honored their dignity while teaching them about gratitude and family loyalty. Third, it would establish a foundation for rebuilding our relationships based on honesty, respect, and mutual support. "I want you to purchase Marcus's outstanding business debts," I instructed David. "All of them. I want to own every loan, every credit line, every financial obligation he has. But don't let him know the source of the purchase until I'm ready to reveal it. That's going to cost substantial money, August. His real estate ventures are leveraged pretty heavily." "How much?" probably $3 to $4 million, to gain controlling interest in his financial obligations. Do it. And David, I want you to research every family he's defrauded with his predatory lending schemes. I want a complete list with contact information. What are you planning to do? I'm planning to teach him that there are consequences when you prey on families in crisis. But I'm also planning to give him an opportunity to redeem himself if he's willing to learn. As I sat by the pool that night, listening to the waves crash against our private beach, I thought about Sarah and how proud she would be of what I was about to do. She had always believed that wealth was a responsibility, not a privilege, and that the greatest gift you could give someone was the opportunity to become a better version of themselves. My phone buzzed with a text from James, my private investigator. Marcus had indeed contacted my family that afternoon, just as David had predicted. He was planning to make his generous offer to help them on Monday morning, right after the bank began foreclosure proceedings. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Marcus had been orchestrating this situation for months, but Marcus had no idea that he was about to become a lesson in the difference between exploitation and generosity. He was about to learn that the nephew he had been undermining was actually in a position to destroy everything he had spent years building. I opened my investment portfolio and reviewed the numbers one more time. $20,412,000. More than enough to save my family, destroy Marcus's predatory empire, and establish a foundation that would help other families avoid the pain mine had experienced. Tomorrow, I would begin the final phase of my plan. It was time to stop hiding and start fighting back. I woke up before sunrise on Saturday morning to the sound of waves gently lapping against our private beach. Emma was still sleeping peacefully in her room, exhausted from a day of excitement and new experiences. I made coffee in the gourmet kitchen and stepped out onto the terrace to watch the sun rise over Biscayne Bay, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks that reminded me why Sarah had fallen in love with this place. By 6 in the morning, I was already on the phone with my investment team in New York, instructing them to begin the most aggressive financial campaign of my life. My wealth management advisor, Patricia Chen, had been handling my portfolio since Sarah's death, and she understood both my conservative approach to personal spending and my willingness to invest heavily in causes that mattered to me. Patricia, I need you to structure a series of purchases that will give me controlling interest in Henderson Real Estate Holdings, I said, referring to Marcus's company. I want it done through multiple shell corporations so the source of the purchases isn't immediately obvious. August, that's going to require significant capital deployment. Are you sure you want to concentrate that much of your wealth in one target? I'm not just targeting his company, Patricia. I'm targeting his entire predatory lending operation. I want to own every debt, every property, and every financial instrument he's been using to exploit families in distress. What Marcus had built was actually quite sophisticated from a legal perspective. He had established multiple limited liability companies that allowed him to compartmentalize risk while maximizing profit from distressed property acquisitions. He would identify families facing foreclosure, approach them with offers to pay off their existing mortgages, then structure new private loans with impossible terms that guaranteed default and property transfer. Here's what I want you to do, I continued. Purchase all of his outstanding commercial debts through Henderson Capital Group. Buy out his lines of credit through Seashore Investment Partners. Acquire his property management contracts through Miami Holdings LLC. By Monday morning, I want to own every financial obligation that keeps his operation running. That's going to cost between $3 and $4 million. August, do it. And Patricia, I want everything documented with complete transparency. Every transaction, every contract, every legal filing. When this is over, I want a paper trail that shows exactly how his operation worked and exactly how we dismantled it. While Patricia and her team began executing the financial acquisitions, I called Jake Morrison, my documentary filmmaker friend who lived in Atlanta. Jake was an award-winning investigative journalist who specialized in exposing corporate fraud and white-collar crime. 2 years earlier, I had anonymously funded his documentary about predatory lending practices in low-income communities, a project that had won several film festival awards and led to legislative changes in Georgia. Jake, I have a story for you that's going to blow your mind, I said when he answered the phone. but I need your help with something more personal than your usual projects. August, man, it's been forever. What's going on? I need you to film a family meeting next Friday afternoon in Columbus, Ohio. It's going to involve the exposure of a predatory lending scheme, the revelation of a secret inheritance, and the kind of family drama that could change several lives forever. That sounds like exactly the kind of story I love. What's the catch? The catch is that I'm at the center of it, and I need you to help me document everything so that everyone involved understands the full scope of what happened. Jake agreed immediately, understanding that this was connected to the anonymous funding he had received for his previous project. He would drive to Columbus on Thursday and set up discreet cameras in my lawyer's conference room to capture the family meeting that would change everything. Next, I called David Mitchell and instructed him to begin the legal phase of my counterattack. I wanted him to prepare a comprehensive presentation that would accomplish multiple goals simultaneously. First, I want you to document every anonymous payment the Samuel Trust has made to my family over the past 2 years, I said. Every medical bill, every tuition payment, every mortgage assistance, every prescription drug cost. I want them to see exactly what they've been receiving and exactly where it came from. That's going to be emotionally devastating for them, August. Are you sure you want to approach it so directly? David, they called me trash and kicked me out of their house. They've been telling people I'm a deadbeat who refuses help from his family. They have no idea that I'm the reason they've been able to maintain their lifestyle for 2 years. It's time for the truth. What about Marcus's offer? He's scheduled to meet with your family on Monday morning. Let him make his pitch. Let them see what their alternative looks like. Let them understand the difference between someone who helps because he loves them and someone who helps because he wants to exploit them. I wanted my family to experience the full weight of their situation before they understood how close they had come to losing everything. They needed to feel the fear of Marcus's predatory terms, the humiliation of accepting help from someone who didn't care about them, and the desperation of having no other options before they could appreciate what they had rejected in me. David, there's something else I want you to do. I want you to research every family that Marcus has defrauded over the past 5 years. I want contact information for all of them. What are you planning? I'm planning to give them their houses back. The plan I outlined to David was unprecedented in its scope and ambition. Not only would I save my own family from Marcus's scheme, but I would also reverse the damage he had done to other families throughout Columbus. I would purchase their homes from Marcus at current market value, then sell them back to the original families at the prices they had originally owed before his intervention. That's going to cost millions of dollars, August. I have millions of dollars, David. And Sarah always said that wealth without purpose is just hoarding. By noon, my entire team was working on different aspects of the plan. Patricia was executing the financial acquisitions that would give me control over Marcus's operation. Jake was preparing to document the family confrontation. David was researching Marcus's victims and preparing the legal documents that would transfer their homes back to them. But there was one more element I needed to add to make the plan complete. I needed someone who could help Marcus understand that he had a choice between destruction and redemption. Someone who could guide him toward becoming the kind of man who helped families instead of exploiting them. I called Father Michael Santos, the priest at St. Mary's Catholic Church where my family had attended services for 20 years. Father Santos had known me since childhood, had performed Sarah's funeral service, and had been quietly counseling my family through their financial struggles without knowing that I was the source of their mysterious assistance. Father Santos, this is August Henderson. I need to talk to you about something that's going to happen next week. August, my son, it's wonderful to hear from you. Your mother mentioned that there was some difficulty at Thanksgiving dinner. Father, there's going to be a situation involving my family and my Uncle Marcus that I think you should know about, and I'm going to need your help to make sure everyone learns something positive from what's about to happen. I explained the situation in broad terms, without revealing the specific details of my wealth or Marcus's crimes. Father Santos listened carefully, understanding immediately that this was about much more than money or family drama. August, what you're describing sounds like an opportunity for healing and growth for everyone involved. How can I help? I want you to be present when the truth is revealed. I want you to help my family and Marcus understand that this is about love and forgiveness, not about punishment or revenge. Father Santos agreed to attend Friday's meeting, understanding that his presence would help everyone involved focus on the spiritual and emotional aspects of what was happening rather than just the financial implications. As Emma and I spent Saturday afternoon building sandcastles on our private beach, I felt a sense of peace settling over me for the first time since Sarah's death. I was finally taking action instead of hiding in the shadows. I was finally fighting back against the injustice and misunderstanding that had torn my family apart. That evening, I received a call from James, my private investigator, with the final piece of information I needed to complete my plan. August. Marcus met with your parents today at their house. He made his formal offer to help them with their mortgage situation. What were the terms? Exactly what we expected. He offered to pay off their current mortgage and give them a new private loan at 8% interest using the house as collateral. But the contract includes clauses that would allow him to foreclose if they miss even one payment, and there are penalties that would make it virtually impossible for them to ever pay off the loan. How did they respond? Your father was suspicious of the terms, but your mother was relieved to have any option at all. They're supposed to give him an answer by Wednesday. Perfect. That gives us exactly the timeline we need. Everything was falling into place. By Friday afternoon, my family would understand the choice they were facing. Accept help from someone who loved them unconditionally, or accept help from someone who planned to exploit their desperation for his own profit. But more importantly, they would understand that the son they had rejected was actually the person who had been their salvation all along. Friday afternoon arrived with typical November weather in Columbus, gray skies and a cold wind that rattled the windows of David Mitchell's law office. I had driven back from Miami on Wednesday, leaving Emma with my trusted nanny Maria at the beach house so she wouldn't have to witness what was about to unfold. This confrontation was going to be intense and emotional, and I wanted to protect her from the adult complexities of family betrayal and redemption. I arrived at David's office at exactly 2 o'clock, 1 hour before the scheduled meeting with my family. Jake Morrison had already set up his discreet cameras in the large conference room, positioning them to capture every angle of what was about to happen without being intrusive or obvious. Father Santos arrived a few minutes after me, dressed in his simple black clerical clothes, ready to provide spiritual guidance if the situation became too heated. Everyone clear on the plan? I asked as we did a final review of the presentation materials. The family thinks they're here to discuss previously unknown aspects of Sarah's estate, David confirmed. Marcus thinks he's been invited to provide additional context about their current financial situation. Neither party knows the other will be here until they walk into the room. And the documentation? Everything's ready. The complete financial disclosure, the trust fund records, every payment made over the past 2 years, photos and videos of your Miami estate, and the evidence of Marcus's predatory lending practices with other families. At 3 o'clock sharp, my family arrived together in Dad's pickup truck. Through the office windows I could see them walking up the sidewalk, their faces showing the strain of the past week. Dad looked older than his 58 years, his shoulders bent under the weight of financial pressure and family responsibility. Mom walked beside him, clutching her purse with the nervous energy of someone who had been worrying about money for too long. Tyler and Jessica followed behind, both of them looking confused about why they had been summoned to a lawyer's office to discuss their dead sister-in-law's estate. Marcus arrived separately in his expensive BMW sedan, dressed in his usual expensive suit and confident demeanor. At 45 years old, he had the appearance of a successful businessman, someone who had built prosperity through hard work and smart decisions. What wasn't visible was the trail of broken families and stolen homes that had funded his comfortable lifestyle. David escorted everyone into the conference room, where they found me sitting calmly at the head of the table. The shock on their faces was immediate and profound. Dad's jaw tightened with anger. Mom looked confused and worried. Tyler and Jessica exchanged glances that clearly communicated their belief that I shouldn't be there. Marcus smiled with the predatory confidence of someone who thought he was about to close a profitable deal. "What is he doing here?" Dad demanded, pointing at me with the same contempt he had shown on Thanksgiving night. "Mr. Henderson," David said formally, "August is here because this meeting concerns him directly. Please, everyone take a seat so we can begin." Father Santos smiled warmly at everyone and offered a brief prayer for wisdom and understanding, which helped calm the initial tension in the room. Marcus sat directly across from me, studying my face with obvious curiosity about why the family failure was present at what he assumed was a business meeting. "Ladies and gentlemen," David began, "I've asked you here today because there are some important things you need to understand about August's financial situation and how it relates to your family's recent circumstances." He activated the wall-mounted television and began the presentation I had spent the past week preparing. The first slide was simple and devastating. The Samuel Trust, Anonymous Family Assistance, 2022 to 2024. 2 years ago, August established a private trust fund to provide anonymous financial assistance to his family members. David continued as the slide changed to show the total amount. To date, this trust has distributed $453,000 to various family members for medical expenses, education costs, mortgage assistance, and prescription medications. The silence in the room was absolute. Dad's face went pale as the numbers appeared on screen. Mom's hand flew to her mouth in shock. Tyler slumped in his chair as if he had been physically struck. Jessica began to cry quietly. The next series of slides showed every transaction in detail. Dad's heart surgery, $68,000 paid anonymously by the Samuel Trust. Tyler's Princeton tuition, $95,000 per year in mysterious scholarship funds that were actually August's money. Jessica's mortgage, $42,000 in anonymous payments that had prevented foreclosure. Mom's prescription medications, $800 per month, through a pharmaceutical program that was secretly funded by her son. "This is impossible," Tyler whispered. "August lives in a tiny apartment. He drives an old Honda. He works at some dead-end office job." David clicked to the next slide, which showed photographs of my Miami Beach house, my investment portfolio summary, and the legal documents establishing my $20 million inheritance from Sarah's tech company stock options. "August Henderson is worth over $20 million, David announced. "He has been living modestly by choice while using his wealth to ensure that his family could maintain their lifestyle and handle their financial obligations." Marcus had gone completely silent, his confident demeanor evaporating as he realized that the family he had been planning to exploit was actually backed by generational wealth. The nephew he had been undermining was actually in a position to destroy him completely. "There's more you need to know," David continued, clicking to a slide that showed Marcus's real estate holdings and predatory lending practices. Marcus Henderson has been systematically targeting families in financial distress throughout Columbus, offering to help with their mortgage problems, then structuring loans designed to guarantee foreclosure and property transfer. The evidence was overwhelming. Photos of families who had lost their homes, legal documents showing the predatory terms Marcus used, financial records proving that he had acquired 14 properties worth over $2 million through these schemes. "The loan terms Marcus offered your family this week follow the same pattern," David explained as a copy of Marcus's proposed contract appeared on screen. "Within 18 months, you would have defaulted on the payments and lost your home to him at a fraction of its actual value." Dad turned to Marcus with rage building in his eyes. "You son of a bitch. You were planning to steal our house." "Wait," Marcus said desperately. "There's been a misunderstanding. I was trying to help the family." "No," I said, speaking for the first time since the meeting began. "You were trying to help yourself, just like you helped yourself to 14 other families' homes over the past 5 years." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gray Columbus afternoon. "But here's what's going to happen now. I've purchased all of your outstanding business debts, Marcus. Every loan, every line of credit, every financial obligation that keeps your operation running. As of this morning, you work for me." Marcus went completely white. "That's not possible." "It's not only possible, it's done." I turned back to face my family. "But I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in redemption. Marcus, you have a choice. You can spend the next 5 years working to return every home you've stolen to the families you took them from, or you can face criminal fraud charges that will send you to prison and leave you with nothing." Father Santos spoke for the first time. "Marcus, August is offering you an opportunity to make things right with the families you've hurt. This is a chance for you to become the man God intended you to be." "What about us?" Mom asked quietly, her voice breaking with emotion. August, what about your family? I looked at each of them, seeing the shame and regret in their faces, understanding that they were finally beginning to comprehend what they had thrown away when they called me trash and kicked me out of their house. You have a choice too, I said. You can accept help from someone who loves you unconditionally, or you can keep believing that I'm a failure who has nothing to offer. But if you choose to rebuild our relationship, it has to be based on honesty, respect, and understanding. Dad stood up slowly, his tough construction worker facade crumbling completely. Son, I don't know how to apologize for what I said to you. I don't know how to make this right. You don't need to make it right, Dad. You just need to decide whether you want me in your life or not. Tyler was crying openly now. August, I told people you were mooching off the family. I told my friends you were a deadbeat. I didn't know. I'm so sorry. The question isn't what you said before, Tyler. The question is what you're going to do now. Jessica walked over and threw her arms around me, sobbing against my shoulder. We almost lost everything because we were too proud to see what was right in front of us. I held my sister close, feeling the weight of 2 years of separation and misunderstanding beginning to lift. We didn't lose anything, Jess. We just found our way back to each other. Marcus sat in stunned silence as David presented him with the contracts that would structure his redemption program. He could spend the next 5 years working as my employee to return stolen homes to their rightful owners, or he could face criminal prosecution for fraud. The choice was his. But either way, his predatory lending operation was finished. There's one more thing, I said as the meeting began to wind down. I'm establishing the Sarah Memorial Foundation to help single parents and prevent family separation. The foundation's first project will be building affordable housing for families in crisis, and I want all of you to be involved in making it successful. Dad walked over to where I was standing and put his weathered construction worker's hand on my shoulder. August, I've been a fool. I've been so worried about being a failure that I couldn't see the success you had become. Dad, you're not a failure. You're a man who loves his family and works hard to take care of them. That's all I ever wanted to be, too. As my family embraced me one by one, and as Marcus signed the contracts that would transform him from a predator into a force for restoration, I felt Sarah's presence in the room. She would have been proud of what we had accomplished. We had turned betrayal into redemption, fear into understanding, and separation into healing. The meeting ended with Father Santos leading us in a prayer of gratitude and forgiveness, and with my family finally understanding that the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the love and loyalty we show to each other. 1 month later, Emma and I stood on the deck of our Miami beach house, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow would be our second Thanksgiving together as a reunited family, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt genuinely excited about the holiday season. The past 4 weeks had been a whirlwind of change, healing, and new beginnings for everyone involved. Dad had closed Henderson Construction and started working with Marcus on the property restoration project, using his construction skills to help renovate the homes that would be returned to their original families. His pride had been transformed from defensive stubbornness into genuine satisfaction with meaningful work that helped others instead of just generating profit. Mom had quit all 3 of her part-time jobs and was now volunteering full-time with the Sarah Memorial Foundation, coordinating support services for single parents throughout Central Ohio. Her energy and compassion had found the perfect outlet in helping families navigate the challenges I had faced after losing Sarah. Tyler had transferred from Princeton to Ohio State University, choosing to stay closer to family while pursuing a degree in social work. His girlfriend, Amanda, had tried to reconcile with him after learning about our family's real financial situation, but Tyler had realized that he wanted someone who loved him for who he was rather than what he had. He was now dating a wonderful young woman named Rachel, who worked at a local food bank and shared his passion for helping others. Jessica had been promoted to assistant principal at her school and was using her position to implement programs that supported students from single-parent families. Her marriage to Mark had grown stronger through the experience of nearly losing everything, and they were planning to adopt a second child through the Foundation's family support program. Even Marcus had surprised everyone with his genuine commitment to redemption. Working under my supervision, he had already returned 3 homes to families he had previously exploited, and he was developing real expertise in helping distressed homeowners find legitimate solutions to their financial problems. Father Santos had been meeting with him weekly, helping him understand that his skills in real estate and finance could be used to build people up rather than tear them down. The transformation in Marcus was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the entire situation. The man who had spent years preying on vulnerable families was now using his knowledge of predatory lending practices to help other families avoid the traps he had set for them. He was working with the State Attorney General's office to identify and prosecute other predatory lenders throughout Ohio. "Daddy," Emma said, tugging on my hand, "when are Grandma and Grandpa getting here? Their plane lands in 2 hours, sweetheart. Uncle Tyler and Aunt Jessica are picking them up at the airport." This would be the first time my parents had seen our Miami estate, and I was looking forward to showing them what Sarah's legacy had made possible. But more importantly, I was looking forward to Emma getting to know her grandparents in an environment of love and acceptance rather than judgment and rejection. The Sarah Memorial Foundation had officially launched the previous week, with a groundbreaking ceremony for our first affordable housing project in Columbus. 50 families would eventually live in the beautifully designed townhomes that would be available to single parents at below-market rents, with childcare and job training services provided on site. The ceremony had been attended by city officials, community leaders, and 12 of the 14 families that Marcus had previously defrauded. Each of them now owned their homes free and clear, purchased back from Marcus at the original amounts they had owed before his intervention. The 2 remaining families would have their homes restored within the next 60 days. But the most meaningful moment of the ceremony had been Dad's speech about the importance of family loyalty and the danger of judging others based on appearances. His words were carried by local television stations throughout Ohio, and several other cities had contacted the foundation about establishing similar programs in their communities. "August," he had said, looking directly at me from the podium, "taught us that real strength isn't about never falling down. Real strength is about how you lift others up when they've fallen." He showed us that wealth without family is meaningless, but family without understanding can be lost forever. As the sun disappeared below the horizon and the first stars began to appear over Biscayne Bay, I reflected on everything that had happened since that terrible Thanksgiving night when I had been called trash and kicked out of my childhood home. The pain of that moment had been transformed into the catalyst for healing relationships, helping families, and creating something meaningful from Sarah's legacy. The private jet I had chartered for my family's visit appeared as a small light in the darkening sky, bringing the people I loved most to the place that represented hope and new beginnings. Emma jumped up and down with excitement, knowing that she was about to be surrounded by grandparents, aunt, uncle, and cousin, who now understood what family really meant. When everyone arrived at the house an hour later, the reunion was everything I had hoped it would be. Dad stood on our terrace with tears in his eyes, not because he was impressed by the wealth, but because he was proud of how I had used it. Mom immediately fell in love with Emma's excitement about showing off her room and her favorite spots on the beach. Tyler and Jessica marveled at the foundation headquarters I had established in one wing of the house, where full-time staff coordinated our growing programs throughout Ohio. That night, as we all gathered in the living room with the sliding doors open to let in the ocean breeze, I realized that I had learned the most important lesson of my life. Family isn't about blood or money, or meeting other people's expectations. Family is about who stands by you in darkness, and who celebrates your light. Family is about who sees your potential when you can't see it yourself, and who helps you become the person you were meant to be. Marcus arrived the next morning to join us for Thanksgiving dinner, bringing with him a photo album of all the families he had helped restore to their homes. He had asked Father Santos to say a special blessing for the families he had previously hurt, and he presented me with the first annual report of the property restoration project that would help dozens more families over the coming year. As we sat around the dinner table that afternoon, with Emma giggling at her grandparents' stories and the Miami sunshine streaming through the windows, I offered a toast that captured everything I was feeling. To Sarah, who taught us that wealth is a responsibility, not a privilege. To family, who taught us that forgiveness is stronger than pride. And to second chances, which taught us that redemption is always possible when we choose love over fear. The lesson I learned from being rejected by the people I loved most was this: sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to realize how much you mean to them. Sometimes people need to see what they're about to lose before they can appreciate what they already have. And sometimes the person who appears to have the least to offer is actually the person who has been giving the most all along. The Sarah Memorial Foundation continues to grow and help families throughout the country. Marcus has become one of our most effective advocates for ethical lending practices. My family has learned that success isn't always visible and that love sometimes requires difficult lessons. And Emma is growing up understanding that real wealth comes from lifting others up and bringing families together. But the most important thing I learned is that family isn't perfect and love isn't always easy, but both are worth fighting for. When someone shows you who they really are through their actions rather than their words, believe them. And when someone gives you the chance to show who you really are, take it. That's a lesson worth remembering, no matter what challenges life brings your way. Now I have a question for all of you who have been listening to this story. Have you ever been in a situation where your family misunderstood your choices or misjudged your success? How did you handle it? And what did you learn about the importance of family loyalty versus personal pride? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable about family relationships, please give it a like to show your support. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming adversity and finding strength in unexpected places. And please share this story with someone who might need to be reminded that their worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. Thank you for taking this emotional journey with me, and I hope it reminds you to cherish the people who love you, even when that love comes in forms you don't immediately recognize. Until next time, remember that the greatest victories in life aren't about proving others wrong, but about proving to yourself that love and forgiveness are stronger than pride and judgment.